Aloha and welcome to today's virtual info session on the Fulbright U.S. Student Program. My name is Kristen Connors and I'm the Fulbright Program Advisor for graduate students. And I'll be helping to moderate the session and conduct part of the webinar as well. You'll get to hear a little bit about the program from Dr. Betsy Gilliland, who's the advisor for our undergraduate students, but more importantly, you're going to hear from two Fulbrighters as well. I think that's the part that attendees are most excited about. We'll definitely make sure to save time for Q&A at the end, but I thought maybe we could just kind of go around and have everyone introduce themselves. So Dr. Gilliland, do you want to start first?
Sure. Thank you, Kristen. I'm Betsy Gilliland. I'm a professor in the Department of Second Language Studies, but as Kristen noted, I'm also the undergraduate Fulbright Program Advisor, which means that I will work with anybody who's currently an undergraduate, or if you have finished an undergraduate program at UH Mānoa and have not yet started a graduate program. So I would be the person you should talk to.
Jay, do you want to go next? Just briefly introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jay Rich, and just quickly, I completed my Fulbright as an English teaching assistant in Tajikistan.
Nakota?
Hi, my name is Nakota DeFonso. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of History at UH Mānoa, and I'm actually right in the middle of it right now. I'm a part of the Open Research Study Award in Taipei, Taiwan, and I'm being hosted by Academia Sinica over here.
And then just again, introducing myself. So Kristen Connors, I work in graduate division at UH Mānoa. I assist with funding for grad students as well as professional development. But I'm here today in my role as the Fulbright Program Advisor for graduate students. So I had the pleasure of working with both Nakota and Jay on their applications. Let me go ahead and get the slides ready to share with you. Get us started. We're going to have Betsy go over a little bit about the program and its history.
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, so the Fulbright program was created immediately after World War II as a program by the U.S. Department of State in order to give Americans a chance to go to other countries and do research and teaching in order to, as the program mission says, advance human knowledge and innovation, find solutions to complex global issues, and support peaceful relations between the United States and other nations. And so it's jointly implemented by commissions in other countries and U.S. embassies abroad. Next slide. So who are Fulbrighters? Fulbright is a highly competitive program. So Fulbrighters are selected on merit, which means you have to actually apply and show your academic and leadership qualities. But Fulbright is also an opportunity to try to do a research project or a teaching project or an art project of some sort. And so the feasibility of projects is also a part of the qualifications for being a Fulbrighter. Other criteria, like they mentioned on the slides, intellectual curiosity, talent, desire to make an impact in the field and in the world. And both of those are quite important in being a Fulbrighter. So what do you get out of being a Fulbrighter? You get connections both within the US and in the world, and both academic and professional while you're in Fulbright. And then as for the rest of your life after doing Fulbright, you are a Fulbrighter. And as the site also notes, there's no typical Fulbrighter. So you can't have a portrait of one person who is the perfect Fulbrighter. Many different academic, professional, and personal backgrounds. All right, and so are you eligible to be a U.S. student Fulbrighter? As long as you will have finished your bachelor's degree before you start the program that you're applying to, and have not yet received a PhD by the time you start the program, you're eligible. So you can be applying currently as a senior in college, or you can have graduated already, or you could be in a graduate program, or you could be a career professional as long as you don't hold a PhD yet. You do have to be a US citizen to apply for the US student program, and each country has other specific requirements. So it's important to read up on the country you want to go to and the specific program that you want to apply to as well. And I think we're going to turn it over to Jay to tell you a little bit about his experience as an ETA, English Teaching Assistant.
Great. Thank you so much. So as I mentioned before, I was an English teaching assistant in Tajikistan. I was there for the 2021 to 2022 academic year, which was right after I finished my master's in second language studies. So also the same department as Dr. Gilliland. So what the English teaching assistant program really entailed is every day I was working in classroom with English language learners, leading classes, cultural activities, clubs, speaking groups, all sorts of different activities for them. In Tajikistan, it's a little unique. I was placed in a community center in Bokhtar, which is about an hour south of the capital. They were called American Spaces. And so my students ranged a lot from young elementary school students to full professors at the university who were working on improving their English language skills. Some of the specific things that I got to do, a lot of it was things that I came up with or that I worked with students to figure out what they wanted, including classes on technology, so some basic programming courses, how to use different things like setting up Gmail accounts or using online calendars, teaching some basics of SAT, GRE, and TOEFL preparation, as well as all sorts of different clubs as students wanted. There was a little bit of opportunity to travel around within the host country. I traveled between two major cities, between Bokhtar and another city a little bit further away called Kulob. And so I would go between those pretty regularly. I also attended conferences in the capital, Dushanbe, as well as traveling to Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan for a larger regional conference for the Fulbright program. Some of the highlights and things that I don't think anybody could have prepared me for or let me, given me the expectation. A lot of the stuff that we did was working really closely with the US Embassy in Tajikistan. That included a lot of some of their PR stuff. So I got put on a lot of social media ads, including ones with very famous local celebrities, to the point where I would be recognized in the street by people I didn't know because they had seen an Instagram reel that I had done with a really famous rapper. So now as you're thinking about applying for the program and thinking about what you might want to do, where you might want to be, some of the really key things that I recommend you think about is where you're going to go, how that country aligns with your own interests, and then take some time to really do some research, not only on the country you want to go to, but also looking into how the United States government and how the Fulbright program itself might look and take shape in those specific regions. So as I mentioned, where I was, we were a lot of the face of the US Embassy in Tajikistan. And so I knew going into the program that that would be something that was a possibility. I just don't think I could have foreseen how broadly it went. So here are a couple of photos from my time here. On the farthest left, you can see me out with a couple of my students having a picnic out in the mountains. Just next to that is with a few of my students and one of my co-Fulbrighters, where we were cooking a traditional Tajik food called osh plov in the mountains, and it was being filmed and recorded because these were actually two journalism students, and so they were talking about our experiences, interviewing us while doing a traditional activity together. A more typical classroom experience is what I have right here in the middle, of students who were working on different worksheets together, answering and doing some collaborative work. I believe that this might have been when I was working on some, having students learn about different figures from the civil rights movement during February's Black History Month. The top photo over on the right is my entire cohort of Fulbrighters. We had a pretty large cohort for Tajikistan. There were 8 of us that were ETAs and then 1 researcher while we were there. We got to know each other really well. We spent a lot of time together and got through a lot of highs and lows throughout the year. Central Asia can be a pretty intense place. So there was a lot of unexpected political things that we had to deal with as a group. And so these became a really core group of friends. And then down on the bottom right is several of my students near the end of my time there having a huge celebration coinciding both with Eid as well as just a celebration of the end of the academic year and our time together. So having a nice feast at one of my students' houses.
Thank you. Now we'd like to hear about Dakota and your experience so far.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the introduction, I'm one of the recipients of the Open Research Grant for Taiwan. That photo there is of me at the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall. It's one of the many tourist sites that you could visit in Taipei. Yeah, so the project that I'm working on, my dissertation deals with the history of missionary education in China during the Republican period, so early 20th century. And in particular, I'm looking at a university called the University of Shanghai, which was an American Baptist university that operated outside the international settlement from 1906 to 1952. And so, despite the fact that my focus geographically is on Shanghai, I've been quite fortunate that there have been a number of resources in Taiwan as well that have helped me, further the project. So, the open research grant really is open, right? There's like an emphasis on the word open. I remember, our program started on September 1st and we had a 2-day orientation. And then at the end of that 2-day orientation, they're like, all right, well, we'll see you at the next check-in meeting in 6 weeks. And it was a little bit intimidating at first because it's like the schedule is totally what you make of it. It requires a lot of self-discipline. No one's, except for those periodic check-in meetings, like no one's telling you what to do. And so I was a little bit nervous at first, but I did end up making a schedule for myself that helped keep me on track, which I'll maybe talk a little bit more about on the next slide. But yeah, I've been able to conduct a lot of archival work here, right, which is mainly what you're doing for history at the Institute of History and Philology at Academia Sinica, Institute of Modern History at Academia Sinica, also at the National Academy for Educational Research in Taipei. One thing that the Open Research Grant allows you to do is leave your host country for up to 14 days, and that doesn't include weekends. So, it's actually you can make it about 2.5 weeks technically. And so it was during that time that I actually went to Shanghai to collect some vital resources that I needed over there at the Shanghai Municipal Archives and the Shanghai Municipal Library. And so having that flexibility in the open research program to leave your host country for a short period of time can be really helpful if you use it wisely. This open research grant has also been really useful for my work too, because it's been super invaluable for networking with scholars here in Taipei. Academia Sinica, there's always scholars coming through. I mean, you go into the cafeteria during lunchtime, and you'll see scholars from the US, Canada, other parts of East Asia, Europe. As a matter of fact, I was having lunch with a friend of mine who's also an open research grant recipient. And just out of the blue, he sees a professor that he knew from Columbia. And it was completely unplanned. He just sees her walking through the cafeteria and he goes up and says hi to her. And just the look of shock on her face to see him. So you're always running into people. And it's helpful in terms of getting insight, right? You use different scholars you meet as a sounding board, pitch ideas to them, get feedback. And also going to conferences too. There's always workshops, guest speaking lectures, conferences. So there's so many opportunities to network, which I feel like in a way for me, that's going to be the gift that keeps on giving, even after the Fulbright program is over, because my network has just expanded dramatically since being here. Um, Yeah, so here's just a few photos of me while I've been running around Taiwan. I've taken hundreds and hundreds of photos that I have in my Google Drive, so there's no way I'd be able to fit it all on this slide here. But um, uh, it's been a mix of work and play. I've gotten a lot done here for my research, but I've also had the opportunity to travel around and meet new people, and also meet up again with friends who I hadn't seen in a while. So like on the very far left here, I'm there with my wife and one of my friends who I'd met back in 2024 when I was in the critical language scholarship program. He was my language partner. And since 2024, we've, just kept in contact. We've chatted over Line, which is the main messaging app they use in Taiwan. And once I got the Fulbright and I came back, I was like, hey, let's get together for dinner. And, so now it's like, once every, 3, 4 weeks, we'll get together and go grab lunch or dinner and just chat. And it's a good way to catch up, but also to keep your language skills up. Down at the bottom there, it's a smaller image, but you could still probably make out that's me standing with my host at Academia Sinica, Albert Wu, who's just been absolutely phenomenal in terms of giving me great advice. He's been very available. When I set up a meeting with him and bounce some ideas off of him, he's been very willing and able to do that. That other photo on the bottom, that's me in Tainan. I actually went there on vacation recently, and I was living in Tainan in 2018 on a different language scholarship, and I was trying to look for a restaurant that it's like a spicy noodle restaurant that I went to in 2018, and I could not find it. It was the first time I'd been back to Tainan in 8 years. And I was really looking forward to going to that place, and I could not find it. So that was actually kind of a disappointing photo. Right there on the very far right, that's at the Thanksgiving dinner that was hosted by Fulbright. So that's me and the other open research scholars, except for the one guy in the middle. He's a DDRA recipient. But we made a tradition of getting together for dinner every Friday, and it's just a way to, stay connected. And with these open research programs, you can kind of get so lost in your work and everything, so it's been nice to kind of have those Friday dinners to kind of like just decompress and kind of you know just chat with other people. And I'll just say very quickly in the middle there, back in January, Alex Honnold climbed Taipei 101 without any wires or anything. And I went and I saw that. So you could see that really grainy image. And if you look really closely, you could see Alex Honnold climbing off the side there of the building. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that. It's been a great experience of getting a lot of research done, but also just having a lot of good life experiences.
Okay.
Okay, Betsy?
Yep. So Fulbright has two main program types, and you've heard an example of each one from our participant speakers, but overall, there's more than 1,800 different awards. So hopefully there is something that meets your interests that you would be interested in applying for in 140 or more countries around the world. So there are some countries that don't have Fulbright, but there are many, many, many countries. So also, hopefully, there's somewhere that appeals to your interests. The two types of awards, the first one is the Study Research Award. And this one is open, there's many different types within that as well. As Nakota said, his is an open research award, which means that he's doing independent research. He's on his own to work on a project. He has a mentor at a particular institution, but the project is part of his UH Mānoa research for his degree. There's also opportunities to study. So if you're looking to do a master's degree, many countries have Fulbright awards that will fund a year of doing a master's degree in a university in that country. Some of them are actually taught in English as well. So if you're unsure if your language skills would be enough to do a graduate program in another language, you might find a program that teaches the master's in English instead. And there's also arts projects. So similar to research where you would be on your own, but affiliated with an institution and a mentor in that institution. The program that Jay did is the English Teaching Assistantship, where the main focus is teaching English, helping classroom teachers in mostly high schools, some universities in the country where you're posted, and as well as teaching, also being a representative of US culture. And that's US culture writ large, not just any one particular activity of American culture, but all the different things that US culture represents to you. So the awards, the benefits of the award are quite a lot. So leading up to the award and what you get as you are doing the Fulbright, you get round trip airfare paid for. You get a monthly stipend that's usually somewhat equivalent to the cost of living in that place. It would definitely be enough for paying modest rent and buying food and getting around in the country. You'll get accident and sickness benefits, so some kind of insurance coverage. If you're doing the English teaching assistantship, you would also be able to take, before you go, an online TESOL fundamentals course, which gives you some more teaching background, preparation for teaching. And then depending on the country and the award, you may get support for dependents if you have a spouse or children that you want to bring with you. You may get an allowance of some sort for research expenses, for buying materials or various things you need to do for your research. If you're doing a degree of some sort, it could possibly cover the tuition. Many degrees also will, or many Fulbright awards also will cover language lessons. So you don't have to be 100% fluent in the language in order to go. You can use the Fulbright funding to hire a tutor who can help you improve your language skills. There's enhancement activities. Both of our speakers have talked about things that they've done beyond just the main part of their Fulbright degree. Sometimes there's conferences that are in the country or in that region. Also opportunities to travel for part of your research to other countries in that region, and disability-related accommodations. And that's not all. Once you finish your Fulbright award, for the rest of your life, you'll be part of the Fulbright network of alumni and the larger State Department alumni website, which includes other State Department programs as well. If you're looking for a job in the federal government, you get 12 months of non-competitive eligibility when you come back from a Fulbright, which can be a really good leg up for getting a job when there's lots of people applying for it. You'll get a Fulbright email address that you can use for as long as you want to. And there's a Fulbright Association, which is alumni of all the Fulbright programs in the US. And so they also have an annual conference and lots of other useful and interesting resources. So I think, Kristen, it's your turn now.
Yep, I think I pick it up from here. So, okay, so what does it look like if you're trying to prepare an application? Well, it starts now. The application is open. If you have not taken a look at the website, as we mentioned before, you do want to review the general eligibility requirements as well as the country profile requirements. And then I would recommend that you log in, create an account in the portal, and start screening through the application because you're going to be chipping away at that from now until September. So you might have on your radar the October 6th deadline, which is the national deadline when you have to submit your application. But in order to be part of our campus review process, you must have your entire application completed by September 6th. So that means all parts of the online application, the transcripts need to be uploaded, all your recommendation letters need to be in. If a language evaluation is required for your application, that must be in there. If you're doing research, your host affiliate letter needs to be uploaded as well. So we want everything to be completed, because what will happen is we have campus committee reviews, and those reviewers will look at your application, and we meet with you and we give you feedback to try to help you strengthen your application to be the best possible application going forward. Of course, it's up to you what advice you would like to apply and what edits you'd like to make before the October 6th deadline. But the people that are invited to serve on the committee are very familiar with Fulbright. They're all former Fulbrighters themselves, or most of the time are former Fulbrighters themselves. They might be experts in the region, or in addition to the region, maybe also your area of study. And then just knowing what it takes to be a Fulbrighter. As I mentioned, we'll be giving you advice on your application, and that's your opportunity to ask us questions as well, because not all Fulbrighters are invited to an interview. Many countries actually do not conduct an interview. It ends at the application, and that's all you're providing to both people on the National Screening Committee, which happens in the US side, and then to the host country if you go on as a semifinalist. So you want to really make sure to pack in as much information into your application as possible. Then in November, December, as I mentioned, the National Screening Committee meets, and depending on what the country has requested, reviewers will score your application and may even rank it. And then those who meet the country's requests for ranking and rating go on and are selected as semifinalists. If you make it past the semifinalist round, that is when the host country will review your application, and they will be reviewed either by US Embassy members there, if they have a Fulbright commission, people from other agencies or the government who have been asked to review these applications. As I mentioned at that time, if that country does an interview, you may be contacted to meet with the committee there, virtually, I mean. And then we wait and we see what happens if you are selected as a finalist. So that's actually where we're at right now for the 2020, hold on, I gotta get it right, for the 2026-2027 competition, sorry, is we're waiting to hear who's been selected. So we already know who's semifinalists, and now we're waiting to see who's gonna go on to do a Fulbright. Okay. So the application components, there are many, many parts. The nice thing is they've transitioned to having a lot of the things right in the online portal itself. So there's only certain things that you have to upload. Before there were additional components that you had to get separately and then add into the portal. So you know, there's just the general biographical data and program information. And then this is the part that's different, is the short answer. So this past application cycle was the first time that we saw this new short answer section. And there are really three areas that it focuses on: flexibility and adaptability, community engagement, and impact of Fulbright. So if you go to the Fulbright website and you look under the application components section, it breaks down what specifically they want to see for flexibility and adaptability, community engagement, and impact of Fulbright. To be honest, this is the section that I think most applicants struggle with. They're not sure how to provide the information in an interesting, engaging way of what reviewers are looking for. So they start just kind of like spilling out into, you know, things that are not related to flexibility and adaptability, or they start having a laundry list of community engagement. But if you read through again the description of these sections, it's actually very focused and targeted for what they are looking for. And as Fulbright Program Advisors, that's our role for Betsy and I to help you craft those sections. And then the campus committee reviewers will also give you additional feedback on how to answer those questions based on what you've already drafted. The statement of grant purpose is 6,000 characters. There's also a character limit for the short answers. You just really need to be intentional and mindful of what you are including in there. There are a list of questions that, again, in the application components, they're asking you to answer in the grant purpose. And it's your job to find a way to provide all that information in a very, very small space. For the foreign language evaluation, each country will detail if there is a requirement, if it's recommended, or even, I mean, if it's not required. I think Betsy and I are on the same page on this, which is that you should do your best to get a language evaluation. It strengthens your application if you have proficiency in the language, and I think Jay, with his background, would agree as well, right? That at the bare minimum, having hospitality level proficiency will go far in an application. If you have no proficiency, having plans to learn the host country's language would be important to include in your application, and showing any steps like enrolling in classes or anything that you can add in the application towards that area will go far. There are 3 references that are required depending on if you're applying for ETA or for research or study. You will draw upon different recommenders for that. Transcripts are required, as well as if you are going to do research study, the country will specify if a host affiliation letter is required at time of application or will be asked for later, and who can actually serve as an affiliate. So some countries are specific where they'll say it has to be from an educational institution, and then others will not specify anything at all. So it could be a research institution or a nonprofit organization. So you need to pay attention to those details. And then if you are going to be an arts applicant, then there's a whole project portfolio that you have to include as well as part of your application. And depending on what your background for art is, it'll specify what they want in that portfolio. Okay. So now here's the really, really important part of the webinar, which is the general tips and advice. And this is where I'm going to ask Betsy, Dakota, and Jay to all just kind of jump in, and wherever you feel called to speaking on, or if it was your point that you added in here to discuss it. So I guess I'll kick us off by just saying, start now. There's a reason why this application process opened so early and takes so long to go through. It is to your advantage to get a head start on finding affiliates, talking to your language evaluator now before school gets out, and not rushing in August when school begins and trying to ask a faculty to do your language evaluation when they're busy trying to get their classes started. So the essays, the short answers, as we're talking about, it's very intentional. You are going to go through iteration after iteration of your responses. So that takes time, and you want to get feedback on those. Anyone else want to talk about the next one?
Well, I'm just going to jump in on that point too.
Yeah.
The Fulbright application is open, so you can create an account, start looking through all the things that you have to do and upload. And for example, with the foreign language evaluation, you can see it. And if you've got somebody ready to do the evaluation, you can get that uploaded right away. Same with recommendation letters. You can, if you know that a professor is willing to write one, you can have the letter form sent to the professor right away, and then they have all the time between now and September to do it. It's much better than waiting until the first week of September and saying, oh no, I forgot. Professor, can you write me a letter tomorrow? That's very bad form. So yeah, you can start your application right now and just keep plugging away at it, filling in little bits as you go.
Jay, Nakota, do you want to talk a little bit about what kind of research you did on the host country? I mean, you both had experience there, which counts as researching the host country. What's valuable that can add to someone's application by doing this?
Yeah, I'll jump in and start here a little bit. There's about a million different things that you should always be thinking about when you are planning to live or travel or work abroad at all. And when it comes to setting up your application, all of those things need to be considered as well. So as Kristen pointed out, there's the three new sort of short answers. The way that I like to think about those short answer sections are what has been in your past that shows that you can be successful and adapt to a new environment, which means that you're going to need to do some research into what that looks like in your host country. For me in Tajikistan, that meant going and looking at the political history, looking at recent civil unrest and concerns to have around that to know what might be a possibility during my program in Tajikistan. Some of those things did happen. While I was there, there was a whole half of the country that was completely shut off from internet. There was extreme violence. Some of my fellow Fulbrighters had to be evacuated from their host city and shuffled around within the country. I knew that that was a possibility because I had researched what kinds of things happen in Tajikistan. Having that kind of information helped me write about what kinds of things flexibility really meant. I think it's very different political situation there too if you're going to somewhere like Taiwan or Japan, where, you know, there's a lot more stability in the political system, but there might be bigger issues around like earthquakes or other kinds of safety concerns that you might not be as familiar with. Then the next big one about community engagement is thinking about what's actually in the country that you can do during your program. And that's when I really recommend looking at either if it's a post country like Tajikistan is, where the US Embassy is the one that actually oversees the Fulbright programs. Look at their Instagram page, look at their website, see what kinds of news they are putting out, what things they're highlighting, so you can get a better sense of what they're looking for, what their goals are, and where they're really active. So you can make sure that your application is tailored a little bit to that. And, you know, if there's something like for me, there was a lot of interest in technology, and I have some background as a computer programmer. So I was able to input that as part of my community engagement, was that I would work with developing technology skills among students. And that's something that was really valued by both the students and, for the application phase, the Fulbright post, which was really important. If it's a country like Taiwan that has a Fulbright commission, or Turkey, or a dozen other countries, look at some of the things that those bodies are putting out as well to see what they're highlighting, what things they think are good aspects of community engagement, and think about yourself in those positions about, you know, do you really enjoy sports? Are there sports clubs that you want to start and work with youth in the city that you're placed in? Those are different ways to think about community engagement, of how to have your impact on the community last beyond your time there. The final question is a lot more about the impact that this program will have on you and the US after the program. So thinking a little bit about past, present, and then the future after the Fulbright program, of why would they invest in you? The Fulbright program is great. It provides a lot of diplomatic relations between the US and other countries. But a large part of it is also an investment in US citizens to have them develop skills, connections, and the ability to be able to take what they're learning and experiencing and bring it back to the US. So thinking a little bit more about how your future academic plans, your future professional or career plans are going to benefit from the experiences that you make and the connections that you make in the host country. So for that, I would definitely say look at alumni of the program and see the sorts of things that they're doing. You can go onto the Fulbright website, and there's a grantee directory where you can look up every grantee that had been affiliated with the University of Hawaii at Manoa and see where they went, what kinds of programs they did. Or you can look and see all of the grantees from a specific country. Right now, I'm currently in law school, and one of the things that we are continually told is while you are a student, you have this beautiful shield that you can cold email or cold LinkedIn message anybody that you want right now. And you'll probably get a response at least some of the time. So you can find somebody who did a Fulbright doing a similar research project or in a country that you did, reach out to them and just ask them about their experience. They'll be able to tell you some of the insider information that you can't get just from researching the country to know more about what it's like on the actual program and what the people who are in charge of the program and overseeing things day to day are actually looking for and really value. That's some of the way that I knew that social media was going to be a really big thing during my Fulbright program, because other Fulbrighters the previous years had said, oh, this is the guy who does a lot of the overseeing and he loves Instagram. So I knew that that was going to be something to take and put into my application. There really isn't too much research that you can do, but I would focus really specifically on what your day-to-day life would look like if you were living and doing research or working and teaching, studying in the host country. Look at what cities are like, what the cost of living might be, and think realistically about what kinds of challenges you might face. Yeah, so I think that those are the key things of look at what your day-to-day life is going to be, and then look at the US in the host country and see what sorts of things they really value.
Thank you, Jay. That was really thorough. Really, really appreciate that. Nakota, is there anything you want to add to researching the host country? Or I know you had thoughts about the focus on impact, especially discussing the broader impact beyond, someone's specific field. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll just say a little bit about those short answers. Although it's the case that there's not a personal statement anymore, when I was looking over, some of the in detail, like what they wanted to know in terms of, flexibility, community engagement, impact. I see that as a way still to talk about yourself. So I see it as sort of in a way like a personal statement. Getting to know who the person is just beyond their research. And so, what I would say is, if you have never maybe for example you're applying for one of the master's programs, you've never traveled to that country before, you have limited travel experience and you don't know how to talk about flexibility with dealing living in other cultures outside the US, things like that within your own community, right? Like ask yourself, just take a pen and paper and write down how have you engaged with your local community? What challenges or barriers have you faced just in your own personal life, and how have you demonstrated flexibility in working around those challenges and barriers. So, I don't think, even if you haven't been to that host country before, you've only had limited experience traveling to that country before, there's still ways to talk about yourself in a compelling way that I think will show to the committee the type of person you are, and show them that you're the type of person who is ready for, a big experience like this. I would also just say too, in terms of you know, looking for a host and kind of getting started to apply. I think finding uh, a host who is, if you're applying for the open research grant, like what I did, finding a host who's sincerely interested in seeing you grow as a researcher and sincerely seeing you, uh, you know, uh, turn this research into a full-fledged, project that you'll then be able to defend when you defend your dissertation. I think is super important. So what I did when I was looking around for a Fulbright host is I sent a lot of cold emails, and one of the people who ended up responding to my email was Albert Wu, who's my host now, and I said, "Hey, can we have a Zoom meeting?" And we talked over the Zoom meeting, and right off the bat, we had a great connection. He's a very warm guy. And also too, even in that initial Zoom meeting, he was already giving me good feedback on my project, and he was asking me all of these detailed questions. And so I knew right from the beginning that he is someone who would, if I were to get the Fulbright, would really, you know, help me out a lot in developing this project. So, if someone here is listening who's thinking about applying for that open research grant, definitely be thorough. I think with any host country you apply to, you're going to have multiple options of people who you could potentially work with. So, don't just rush into, one uh like the first person to respond to your cold email, I guess is what I'm saying. And then also too, before you apply, like if you know like Joseph was saying, like if you know an alumnus, like if you know someone who previously had the Fulbright program, I think those people are tremendous resources to help you along too. I was lucky enough to know some people who had gotten the Fulbright in the past. And I'd ask them, hey, like, can you give me advice? Like, can you help me think about how to go about this process? And so I think their advice was also tremendously helpful as well. So I guess with those 2 points, what I'm just saying is like don't be shy, like send a lot of emails to people, be very extroverted, because that's what's really going to help you along, especially in those early stages. Um, this just on one other point too, I guess I'll say while I'm giving out tips here, it's when you start the writing process, right? Like Kristen Connors is going to be giving you a lot of edits and ways to improve your writing. So I went through four drafts of the statement of purpose in the personal history statement before I finally submitted this thing. And the first time I submitted my paper, a bunch of red marks came back. It was, just a ton of things that she asked me to change. So I'm like, okay, so I go back and I make the edits, submit a second draft. A ton of red marks and comments come back, and then by the third time I submit it, I'm like, all right, like finally I've got it down. I've got like a perfect paper here. I submit the third draft. A ton of red marks come back, and I'm like, oh my God, like there's still more things I need to change. And it was definitely a tough process, but my point here is like don't be precious with your writing. Even if you think your writing is good, you're working with someone who has been doing this for many, many years, and has seen many students go off to, like myself, become, Fulbright grantees. So, especially for someone like me who I think in the past was very precious with his writing, I've gotten better at it now. Um, when it comes to flexibility, be very flexible with your writing and definitely be ready to take a lot of constructive criticism to improve the paper to its final product.
Goal is to help. So it's a it's a it's a growing process so, for sure. Um, so as far as like the focus on impact, Nakota, I don't know if you remember, because I know this was something that we had discussed about how do we go beyond just discussing education, the history of education, and what's the broader impact, right? Um, so do you have any tips on that as well that you can share?
Yeah, so I mean to speak in general terms, right? Like I would recommend that, if you know people who are in other fields of study, right? Like so for example, if you study history, maybe talk to people in the poli sci department or literature department, anthropology, whatever, and just say like, hey, can you take a look at this paper? And like as an anthropologist, like as a literature person, as a political scientist, like, how are you looking at this topic, right? And so I think getting feedback from people who come from other academic disciplines can help you think about, yeah, how do I break out of, my particular silo, right? Like again, going back to the thing I was saying about writing all these drafts, like my first draft was like super history focused, right? It's like even if I look back at it now, I think, oh man, no one outside of a historian is going to be interested in reading this. So, um, yeah, I would say just like finding people who, you know, people whose opinions you trust and value to maybe give you feedback on how you can expand outside of your particular field. So for me, like, I found a kind of contemporary connection. I tried to make a connection between education in Republican China and education in China today. So a kind of like contemporary political science oriented connection. I did try to connect it to education studies as well. So it can be tough, especially if, you've been working on this topic for a long time and you're talking to other people within just your department to only see it in those terms. But yeah, in terms of impact, I would just say like talk to people outside of just your discipline to give their thoughts.
And I'll just add that the UH Manoa Writing Center is also an excellent resource that we like to refer students to. They are open until about the second week of May before the semester closes, and then they will reopen again normally in September. But by that time, you will have already, finished your application. And then they're a good tool for helping you with the final revisions before you submit. So if you aren't sure who else to reach out to because you don't have a lot of colleagues outside of your field, just know that the Writing Center is a resource for you. Jay, can you talk a little bit about highlighting teaching experiences or potential that are related experiences? Because sometimes people want to do ETA, but they don't have the in-classroom experience as a teacher. So what are things that you could talk about that would be helpful to show that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I applied for the ETA position, I had never taught in a classroom. I had no experience as a teacher. Now, I did have the benefit of having just graduated with a master's degree in second language studies, so there was a lot of the theory of education in my back pocket. But the practical day-to-day skills of being a teacher don't just come from teaching. So some of the things that I highlighted when I was putting my application together, if I recall correctly, this many years later, really focusing a little bit on experiences I had had tutoring. So it might be one-on-one experiences of teaching, but those are still valuable teaching experiences. Talking about other places where there's sort of the cross-cultural communication experiences. Because when you are teaching a language, especially overseas as a US citizen, a lot of what you're going to be doing is learning how to manage a classroom where there's very different cultural expectations. And so talking about other times that you have worked across cultural boundaries or with people from significantly different backgrounds can be really helpful in highlighting how you can successfully manage students in a classroom that do come from different backgrounds. A lot of that can be managing experience in a job that you've had where you're working with people from different backgrounds. Hospitality is a great example of one where you have sort of the cordial professional demeanor while you're interacting with people regularly on a daily basis. But then a lot of it can also just be thinking about really great teachers you've had in your past, what things they did that you really enjoyed, and then see about how you can build your own experiences as a student into what you would want to be as a teacher. It's definitely not necessary that you have teaching experience prior to being selected as an ETA. They do, as Kristen mentioned, as Betsy mentioned, there's a short TESOL program that you would take online prior to going overseas that gives you sort of the ins and outs of how to put together a lesson plan, how to plan a syllabus over a long term, what sorts of activities are good to get people active and engaged. So they are going to give you some of those practical guidance before you go. And a lot of the time, Fulbrighters are also working as co-teachers in a room with somebody who has more experience as a teacher. So what they really want to see in your teaching experience is that potential. So your willingness to learn, critically thinking about different ways that you have engaged with people across different cultural boundaries, And then any kind of experience you've had either tutoring or working on explaining concepts to other people in more formal teaching settings.
Thanks.
BJ.
Kristen, can I
Yeah.
just add, somebody posted a question in the chat or in the Q&A, and I accidentally said I would answer it live instead of typing an answer, and apparently you can't undo that. So I will answer your
That's okay.
question. I will
Yeah,
answer
well,
the question live. You asked about PhD programs with Fulbright. Fulbright does not actually fund PhD programs. You can do a master's degree through Fulbright, but if you're a PhD student or interested in doing a PhD, Fulbright is only for a research component of your program. You have to be in another PhD program. And doing the Fulbright within your program rather than going to a university in another country to do a PhD.
well, sorry. Well, I can help clarify about that. So,
Okay, yep, go for it.
in general, for study awards, it's 1 year of funding support through Fulbright. And as we mentioned, that doesn't always include tuition support. The tuition support normally gets coordinated directly with the institution itself. And so for those who are interested in doing study, there are named awards that are for very specific institutions for certain types of degrees or areas of study. And then, like Nakota applied for the Open Study Research Award, you're competing against people who want to do research and who want to study a degree. So if you apply for an Open Study Award in a country, then what that means is you could apply to do a master's or you could apply to do a PhD, but you're only going to get funding through Fulbright for 1 year. So then you're on your own for the remainder of your PhD program to get that funded. Whereas a lot of the times the programs they're looking at on the master's level, you can accomplish in 1 year, or if you are accomplishing it in 2 years, then you're funding the second year on your own. PhD, it's, a lot more funding on your own. So yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, because I know we're going to come up on Q&A soon and we have a few more slides to get through. I realized that one of the bullets on this slide fell into the footer and you can't necessarily see the words. And it just says authentic applications using your own words. So, okay. And then just to close up the tips and advice, because I know some of these are things we actually have been talking about as well. I know some people already have federally funded fellowships or are looking to apply for other federally funded opportunities. So with the government, federal government, there's this no double dipping rule. And so if you are awarded a Fulbright, you cannot have another federally funded fellowship at the same time. Okay, so if you are looking to apply for more than one opportunity, you should be talking to whoever the advisor is on those other fellowships that you're looking to apply for. Here at UH Manoa, if you are a graduate assistant and then you are awarded a Fulbright, when you go abroad, you cannot have a GA ship while you are abroad on Fulbright. That is a no-no. So just want to make sure that that is clarified as well. Again, I think we talked about some of these final thoughts, but as far as that broader multiplier effect, because that's actually specifically what they're looking for a response in and the impact of Fulbright. Nakota and Jay, are there things you want to share? Because I think some of these were your points that you added on here.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, so just a couple of points there in the final thoughts, like one of them, if you're awarded, be open to every experience that comes your way. Um, I would say that generally speaking, I'm actually more of an introverted person, and so when I travel abroad, I kind of force myself to be more extroverted, especially when it comes to academic opportunities, if you get this thing. Um, anytime someone invites you to a conference or to, go to a guest lecture or to get lunch with a visiting scholar, I would just say like say yes to everything every single time because you have no idea what type of network that's going to create for you, what types of future opportunities that's going to open for you. And the older I get, the more and more I realize that um, a lot of times success is not a reproducible, the actual process is not a reproducible thing. It's just sort of a matter of just taking every single opportunity, and some of those opportunities will lead to something else, and some of them won't. But just saying yes to everything really is really going to help you in the long run. And also too, just with non-academic opportunities as well, right? You get if you're an open research fellow, um, it's only 1 year, like it's a limited period of time. So like spend that time making as many memories as possible. I'm not a big like photo person, but I've really made a point of like just taking pictures of everything, traveling a lot, and just like saving those memories because I know 20 years from now I'll find them to be really meaningful. So, yeah, I would just say that in terms of like saying yes to everything. And then I'll just very quickly say one more point here. Like, um, if you get this thing, I can say as someone who's in it right now, it's a tremendous opportunity, and it's definitely not lost on me how fortunate I am to get this when there's so many people who've applied for it that haven't gotten it, and maybe there's people who've applied multiple times and haven't gotten it. So like if you get this, for me at least, I feel a responsibility to help anyone who wants to take a shot at this themselves. And so I would challenge you to take that same attitude as well.
I would definitely echo everything that Nakota just said. Something else that keeps coming to my mind as one of the biggest benefits of Fulbright that we've mentioned a few times, but I really can't emphasize how much the network of people that you interact with on your Fulbright and afterwards among other Fulbrighters can really be sort of a game changer in your career as well as your personal life. Just thinking about my time when I was on my Fulbright, some of the people that I interacted with, some of my students actually went on to be awarded Fulbrights themselves. And so one of my students from Tajikistan came to the US and completed a master's degree. And I got to meet up with her while she was visiting in Washington, D.C. for a little while. One of the other people that I became very close with and did a couple projects with in Tajikistan, because just like Nakota, I tried my best to say yes to every opportunity that came up. So, I would do little research grant project things with somebody who had been a Fulbrighter before to go around and teach critical media literacy skills to different areas in Tajikistan. Just last week, I ended up, he contacted me and I did another virtual session with some of his students, again, talking about ethical use of AI and how it looks different in the United States versus Tajikistan. And that only really happened because we had met, we had done some research together in Tajikistan years and years ago. And those kinds of connections just sort of continue to stay strong. After coming back to the US at the close of my Fulbright, both here in Hawaii and then for the few years that I was in Washington, D.C. before this as well, I got connected with the local Fulbright chapter that includes both alumni as well as current Fulbrighters in those locations. And as I'm sure you can imagine, there are a lot of people from all around the world that are in pretty much all of these different places, as well as lots of Fulbrighters who had really cool experiences that would love to talk about it. And they did their Fulbright 20, 30 years ago and are now deeply in their careers, have a lot of connections, and can give you great mentorship beyond just as a researcher, as a Fulbrighter, but career mentorship or all sorts of different venues to pursue that way. So I think that the benefit of the people that you meet really cannot be understated.
And we do have a Fulbright chapter here in Hawaii. So Betsy and I are happy to try to get you connected with people who are part of the Fulbright Association in our location. Okay, so just want to open up, see if there's any other questions. We only saw one question in the Q&A, but we're happy to take more. And it's okay if you don't have a question or you can't think of something now. But if you do, oh, sorry, that was the end. Sorry, I thought I had Betsy and my contact information. on the slide. So apologies about that. But if you do have questions, I will stop my slide now. If you do have questions and you would like to get in touch with Betsy or I, so again, I advise graduate students or master's alumni, and then Betsy advises undergraduate students or recent undergraduate alumni at UH Hawaii. So thank you, Betsy, for sharing your email address. I'll put my email address in the box, and apologies, I thought I had that on the slide. So so mine is right there as well. I'll also add that in the notes for the recording. So. And then as Jan Dakota said, you can look at the directory. I know Betsy posted that in the chat box earlier. And a lot of Fulbrighters are very generous with their time. They love to help out other future Fulbrighters. So do not hesitate to reach out to them. Okay. Well, I think since I'm not seeing any questions, that concludes our information session today. Betsy and I look forward to working with you. If you have not signed up for the workshop, we are going to be hosting a hybrid Fulbright writing workshop focusing on the short answers. So that's kind of the tough part of the application, or one of the tough parts, I should say. Sorry, not the tough part, just one of the tough parts of the application. So if you're interested in signing up for the writing workshop and you haven't had a chance to do that, I will go ahead and put that in the chat box as well. And I do see that someone just added something in the chat box. I'm sorry, in the Q&A. What if I'm currently finishing my master's with 1 year left? What would be the best way to approach applying? You should apply now. That's what I say. You should apply now because the competition that's open now is for 27-28. So if you apply now, right, you're starting your application now, you submit it October 2026, then by the end of spring 2027, you should find out if you get Fulbright or not, right? So that means that you'll be finishing your last year next year, and then it hopefully all lines up, and then fall 2027, you go off on your Fulbright.
Yeah, and you can do an open research project. You could do an English teaching assistantship, anything in Fulbright. As long as you don't have a PhD in hand, that's the only cap on it.
I would say that's sort of the timeline that I did, finishing up my master's degree and then immediately that summer going overseas. And I think that that's a great timeline. It works as a really good career transition to go from academia to a sort of professional scholarship experience. And while you're overseas, being on a Fulbright really looks good for any applications you are putting out for when you're coming back at the end. So that is sort of the ideal timeline. So get on that application, start figuring it out.
Well, again, thank you so much to our guest speakers today, Nakota and Jay, for sharing about your Fulbright experiences. And then for our audience members or for those who are watching the recording, thank you for joining us and your interest in Fulbright. Betsy and I look forward to working with you. Please reach out to us. Take care, and this concludes our session.